Well, hello again, folks. Welcome back to another session with the ESM Everything Service Management podcast with myself, Daniel Gilby, and my co-host Sunil, as always. Today, we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into the world of application discovery and dependency mapping. And to that end, we're really pleased to have with us Bob Hart, who is the Technical Product Marketing Manager from Device42. Bob, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. We've got a few questions lined up. Sunil, I think you were going to take the first one, right?
I'm just going to ask Bob, though, before I ask him the first real question. What does the Technical Product Marketing Manager do?
That's a great question. And if there was a job description, I didn't really read it. The truth is, I just do whatever's necessary at this company. But what I found is I'm very passionate about technical solutions in general. But what you find is a lot of engineers are amazing at coming up with solutions and maybe not as fantastic with communicating those to the people that need them. So that's a lot of what I do. Take our technical features and then turn that into, why does the CTO care? Why does the CFO care? Why does the financial vertical care? Why does public sector care? So a lot of my job is that, translating this into your jobs to be done, essentially.
Yeah, I love that, Bob, because and we at Xcession love that because as a technology services organization, it is sometimes very easy to lose focus on the business outcome that your customer is trying to achieve, which is almost always not install that widget, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Unless their job description is install 5 widgets per day.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes we're good at that as well. But I think we focus on the outcomes, which is good. So we got the right guy on the podcast.
Yep. You at least got a guy on the call.
Yeah, well. So the first real question is, and I think the sort of general focus of this podcast is going to be in and around IT asset management.
Sure.
So I guess, Bob, tell us a bit about how IT asset management has changed over the last few years, and really what are the kind of customer challenges around managing assets from an IT perspective in the 2025s?
Sure. That depends heavily on your definition of what the past few years are. Right? Is that the past 5 years or past 20? I mean, like 20 years ago, you could get away with an Excel sheet, right? And you could just track your assets there. Jim has this laptop, put in the serial number, call it good. Very recently, though, I mean, at least if I open up my trauma box and take a look, we had COVID. We had the huge shift of work from home. We've had a multi-cloud explosion in the last decade or so. SaaS has gone through the roof. All of these bring in extra difficulties. Even before COVID, you had a lot of people doing BYOD, bring your own device. And that poses some interesting kind of complications when it comes to an IT organization, right? How do I secure those devices that I don't know I have? If I have different companies or different divisions doing different things in different clouds, how do I get visibility across that? Because it tends to be very siloed, right? If I have a dashboard for AWS, I can't see that from Azure. So if different groups are doing that and you don't have surveillance over all of it, that can be very problematic. And then SaaS explosion, that falls under the out of sight, out of mind. Right? If you're just doing single sign on and I don't know about that, it becomes very hard to track those assets. So those are just a few examples of how ITAM has really changed over at least the last few generations of technology. A generation of technology is like 3 months. So many generations of technology. But those are definitely all things to consider when you're talking ITAM.
So I think what you've summed up there, Bob, in my simple mind here, is that there's just much more complex infrastructure out there, right? And all shapes, sizes, which kind of leads into, I mean, you give a view here is like, well, then why you've kind of, in my mind, highlighted this already, but just for the audience, for our listeners, in your point of view, why would asset management be then so important, especially in a modern businesses today, heavily reliant on digital applications and services and offerings?
Sure. And I'll take off my Device42 hat here for a second. Just me talking as Bob, as a human being, I don't make any decisions without knowing what I have and how I'm using it. Like, I don't even go to the grocery store without first looking in the fridge to see what I already have. So from that perspective, it seems very obvious why you would want a good ITAM solution or CMDB or something like that. Because how do I do any role of IT without that information? How do I secure stuff I don't know I have? How do I do compliance and regulatory adherence if I don't know how things are configured or who's accessing them? How do I do cost projections if I'm a CFO, if I have no idea how much stuff I have and what's coming up for renewal? So regardless of what I'm doing, I'm going to want information. And now putting back on my Device42 hat, we do that. Right? So we grab that information and we put it in a usable format. That way you can see those SaaS usages. You can see that multi and hybrid cloud environment. And that way you can do your job. So that's why I'd say that's important, selfishly and unselfishly.
No, I think that's a perfect analogy, right? You don't go shopping blindly. You've already got stocks of whatever in the house, so why would you go then and buy those things again? And then I think the point you made about risk there as well, like if you don't know what's out there, how can you then control that? If you're in a sensitive environment, working with sensitive information, but you don't know who's accessing it and how, people within your organization, how can you effectively control that? So having that oversight and knowledge, I think, is definitely key there. So, I mean, that kind of leads into then, so for an organization that's perhaps thinking about either enhancing their existing asset management solution or indeed introducing it in a more formal sense, what kind of opportunities beyond what you've kind of described there would be things that people should be thinking about?
I will tell you, the way that I communicate things, and specifically when I'm doing my role as whatever it is, technical product marketing manager, I tend to think of everything, and this is just a Bob thought process, as 5 value pillars, right? So cost, security, risk, agility, and efficiency. And I know security and risk might sound similar, but they're really not, because risk encompasses things like public perception or sustainability and how people are going to optically look at you based on how you run your business. And I find that if you take different features or different solutions and reframe it into those 5 different languages, you can usually find where it's applicable to someone. So a CFO will tend to care more about how does ITAM help them with cost, whereas your CISO is going to care more about how does this help me with my security profile. Your COO might care more about how does this help with efficiency. I don't want my employees sitting around idly. I don't want my employees to quit because they can't get the work done and they're getting frustrated. And so I think if you boil things down into those, you can always be relevant to whoever's listening. So whoever's listening to this podcast, if you're in services management, this is going to help you do things like lower your mean time to resolution. It's going to help you come to a root cause analysis quicker. Whereas if you're a CFO listening to this, you're going to want to take a look at your software license management. Mm-hmm. Do I have unused licenses? Do I have unused product? And so it's really, a 2-hour conversation of where does ITAM help? And it's going to be based on what you do for a role. I promise you, good and accurate and automated information will help you do your job better. Just that might change based on who you're talking to.
Can I ask a question? And you've said something there that really piqued my interest, actually, Bob, right? Which is around agility.
Yeah.
So I think, conceptually, cost, risk, security, service provision.
Yep.
Make a lot of sense, right? Agility is one that I find really interesting because, businesses are increasingly digital, right? The digital landscape is a very fast moving landscape. And actually the ability of organizations to change, in line with the markets that they serve, whilst managing risk and security and service and everything else, right? But actually that can really make or break an
100%.
organization. Nokia, dominant, ruled the world, not so much now.
I noticed the past tense there, yeah.
So I think, how much do you, in your experience, when you engage with customers, how much do you actually focus on that agility piece, or do you tend to lead with perhaps some of these other pillars?
And again, it really depends on who I'm talking to, right? I'm not going to talk to the CFO about agility because chances are they don't care. But the CEO or the CTO, I will likely talk about agility. And that comes, again, in multiple different flavors. One example of when you might care about agility is someone gets a cloud first initiative, right? They need to move, they're closing down a data center, they're doing a merge, they're doing something like that where they need to quickly understand how everything's connected to each other so they can de-risk that transformation. If I move my application up into Azure, but I left the storage or the database back in a data center 500 miles away, that's going to be problematic. You're going to introduce latency and break that application. So that's going to lower your agility. So that's an area where it might come into play. A CEO is going to care about that agility from the competitive advantage. How quickly can I react to a change in the market? And that's going to be different than the way that CTO is looking at it. And then another option to agility would be, how quickly can I react to a problem? Log4j issue comes up, right? Or, hey, we found an issue with this version of Apache, or the one that just came out like a month ago, the FortiGuard issue. How quickly can I find that in my environment so that I can quickly adjust to that before it becomes an exposure for us? So there's a lot of different ways you might want to stress the importance of agility. But I like that subject. That's why I include it in my thinking.
I think, you see, I think that it's often a big part of the or underpins the forward-looking, business, right? The other pillars are, of course, they're pillars, right?
Everyone knows people care about cost.
Exactly. But actually, how do we change to address our customer needs in a dynamic marketplace?
Yeah.
It could kill a business, like I said, right? It could kill a business, right? But actually, the forward-looking organization is thinking about that and thinking about how to set themselves up for future disruption as well, right? The businesses that, survived COVID, for example, right, were the ones that were able to shift their workforce to work from home, right? The ones that couldn't deal with it, well, they probably suffered quite badly, I would think. So,
yeah, if they still exist,
that
was incredibly disruptive for a lot of industries.
Yeah, I bet you saw a big uptick at that point in organizations going, I need somebody to tell me what I've got.
Yep. Well, that's a great point, because if people aren't in the data center, people aren't in the office, you lose that visibility. And a lot of people were relying on what I would call kind of like the human CMDB, where, Fred knows what we have, but I would also argue that makes you fail the bus policy, which is, if Fred gets hit by a bus, can your business stay afloat?
Yeah.
But another point of agility, and this is because of how frequently this is coming up, and your audience will care about this. Certainly my customers will care about this. And then my parent company customers will care about this, Freshservice, Freshworks. People want to rely on AI ops, right? They want that proactive nature, but they want that done automated. So if Device42 is discovering all the certificates in your environment, for instance, and you can see when they're going to expire within 90 days, and then that automatically creates a ticket in Freshservice and automatically gives it to an agent, and then they can update the certificate. Now you have incident avoidance instead of incident response. And I think people are looking for that level of efficiency and agility.
Absolutely.
And that's a brilliant example as well, because I've worked in environments where certificates have expired, and then you just have a real mess, right? And a singular example, but what a great and neat way to just avoid that at all. That's all.
Yeah, I've been calling that incident avoidance instead of incident response. And I spent 8 years in support. I would love to not have a ticket or have a ticket that says do this to prevent a ticket.
Yeah, that whole proactive approach. Those people are definitely looking for that. So you had a really good. Oh, go on, Sal.
Well, no, sorry. I was just going to just sort of just ask another question around some of the drivers, perhaps, that you see in the market today, and I'm particularly thinking about perhaps some of the regulatory change, right? That, for example, DORA in the EU as one that are you seeing things like that becoming much more of the kind of conversation with customers, right? That they're trying to tackle some of these challenges too.
Well, I am, but if you really boiled the ocean here and you took GDPR, you took DORA, you took NIST, you took whatever regulatory HIPAA in the United States, it's all based on what do you have, who has access to it, how's it being used, and is it protected? I mean, it's all different flavors of that, but a lot of that's going to boil down to the function of the CMDB, which obviously is key and parcel to what we do at Device42. So I see that all the time. All the time, people want to know. I mean, I think you gave DORA as one of the examples. DORA, you got to look at your physical infrastructure in the data center and how is this protected. The problem is nobody cares. Like the data center admin cares, but Sunil, who's logging into email, has no idea what the physical hardware that's supporting him logging into email. So if you want to translate that into the business value, you need to go up the stack. So here's the hardware. The hardware is supporting, these switches, these routers, that's supporting this workflow. This workflow supports these business units, and that's what allows Sunil to actually do his job. So you need that full map of hardware all the way to business deliverable. And that way you can actually have a protection plan around it, because not all things need to be protected the same way, right? A switch doesn't necessarily need to be replicated in the same way. It just needs to have the same network throughput. Whereas your database, that database needs to be an exact copy. Otherwise, you can't pull up that workflow. So depending on what your timeframes for protection and how technical that is and what the business value is, how you want to prioritize that, and a disaster recovery or business continuity, those are all things to consider. And if you don't know how it's being used, how do you do that? How do you do any prioritization?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Back to the fridge, right? What do you have?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of milk.
Yeah, absolutely. Although judging by the amount of milk that we buy, I don't think anyone's doing a stock check before we go to the supermarket. But anyway, so you just mentioned slightly earlier on your parent company, Freshworks.
Yep.
So maybe from your perspective, and we have a podcast episode coming out shortly with one of your colleagues who works in Freshservice.
Sure.
So we have had their view on this, but I think interested in your perspective. So why does that partnership make such good sense for both Device42 customers and I suppose the other side of the coin for Freshworks or Freshservice more particular?
And this will be the area where I show a little bit of dirty laundry, which is always fun.
That's good.
I got the news of the acquisition of Freshworks purchasing Device42 while I was at the Teams event for Atlassian. So while I'm working a booth showing Atlassian JSM users how Device42 helps with their ITSM platform, I get the news that Freshworks is buying us. And then we immediately become the pariah.
Yeah, absolutely. We were like, oops, I'm in the wrong place.
Should I just leave? So us getting purchased by Freshworks, the least shocking thing I've ever heard in my life. And the reason for that is Freshservice is a fantastic ITSM platform. And the automation you can do and the AI you can do with Freddy and its ability to control assets and see those up and downstream impacts is fantastic. if it's being fed data. The problem is when you look at the native discovery of Freshworks, it's there, right? You have the agent and the probe. It does collect your Windows environment. It does collect your Linux environment. It will grab VMware, but it's not grabbing things like Hyper-V. It's not grabbing containers that aren't called Kubernetes. It's not grabbing a lot of the physical assets within your data center. And so it's good visibility, but insufficient. It doesn't have that full visibility. And so if you really want to have that reliability in the wonderful platform that it was created to be, it's only as good as the data in. Mm-hmm. So feeding that in and leveling up by bringing in Device42, obvious value to Freshservice. Now on the Device42 side, we do a fantastic job of automatically discovering your environment, grabbing all your assets and looking at the dependencies. And then my next question is, so what?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody's job is to discover everything, right? That's never the end goal. The end goal is not to, congratulations, I'm Ash Ketchum in Pokemon and I caught them all. You need to do something with that information. And so having a solution like Freshservice to push that information into, that way it's actually delivering on that promise of cost savings, of efficiency gains, of security reduction and risk mitigation and things like that. That's an obvious win for us. Plus, we were like 100-person employees and they were 5,000. So obviously much more exposure, much more resources for us to work with. Huge win for us. Yeah. And then the last party who you didn't mention is the customers. The customers obviously just get value out of this. These are two great products brought together. They are better together. This is a 2 + 2 = 5 scenario. So I think this is just wins across the board.
Yeah. So just to sum that up then, so you've got the information that Device42 gets you, fully comprehensive. We'll discover, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, everything infrastructure-wise, wherever it may be. And
this does not mean drinking the Kool-Aid. I do believe we are the world leader on the breadth and depth.
I had heard that.
I legitimately believe it.
So you have all of this information, but to the point you made there, Bob, right? So what? But then now you have a solution there that can do something actionable with it and meaningful with it, right? And then
exactly
to the point you made about certificates earlier, there's other use cases available, right? But that then becomes that kind of whole holistic end-to-end system of action using the information that's available. Yeah, I mean, really
I like that example of the certificates because Freshservice in no way discovers certificates. JSM is not going to discover certificates. Like these, Halo doesn't discover certificates. So these other ITSM vendors that we integrate with, there's gaps. And if there's gaps, you can't leverage that workflow. You can't leverage that automation. So that's really and we don't have ticket creation. We don't have anything to do with that data. So that's an area where that integration and that synergy really is a huge value.
Absolutely. I think it, and again, we mentioned this to your Freshworks colleague, but it also moves your combined businesses up the maturity curve, 100%. Right, of ITSM, ESM applications, because obviously, sort of in the past, BMC and their ADDM tool, right, occupied that space. Obviously, now ServiceNow and
I was about to say, I think we got to talk about the Gorilla service now.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, in a mature organization, in an enterprise organization, right, there is a move, isn't there, around consolidation of tool sets, right? ITSM or ITOM tool sets, right, falls under that broader consolidation initiative. So actually, what you are doing now is offering, or soon to be, I would say, a single, right, solution with modules, component parts of it that allow you to challenge, right, some of those bigger beasts, shall I say?
Yeah, without. I mean, Freshworks is a publicly traded company, so people can look at revenue and whatnot. But I would say there's a much better chance of competing against ServiceNow by bringing some of these gaps out of the equation.
Yes,
and a lot of people are frustrated with ServiceNow. And this is coming from someone who very much likes ServiceNow. I think it's a great product. We also integrate in with ServiceNow. We have a lot of ServiceNow customers. I think a lot of people are frustrated with working with ServiceNow. It can be a giant ordeal. I mean, if you're jumping on to LinkedIn, you will find people with ServiceNow in their role title. You won't find people with Device42 in their role title. You won't find people with Freshservice in their role title because it's not complicated enough to need an employee based on that skill set. And I think some people are just getting tired of that. So I like that there's other options, other very high quality options. I think just in general, competition is a good thing when it comes to the customer.
Yes, just got to have the choice in the market, right?
What? Yeah.
Yeah. Just for the benefit of our listeners, though, Xcession obviously believes that there is a right product for everyone, and some of those will be ServiceNow customers. So, I think it's really, I think it's a really good acquisition, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting move.
I was not surprised it was ITSM. I just didn't know if it was going to be Atlassian, if it was going to be Freshworks, if it was going to be ServiceNow, even if it was going to try and be Halo, trying to eat up. So not shocking. I mean, it's a very clear synergy and a very clear upgrade for the customer. Now, to that perspective, Freshworks is telling Device42 absolutely continue to support these integrations. So we still continue to develop our JSM capabilities. We are still working with our ServiceNow integration connector. So I think that your customers and customers in general just continue to have a wonderful set of options to work with.
Yeah.
So find the right ITSM for you. I like Freshworks.
So you can still take advantage of the amazing capabilities and functionality that Device42 has, but that no way, shape, or form necessitates you to then move on to the Freshservice or similar, other ones of the Freshworks offerings, right? There's still the
only value you're going to be losing is my messaging is going to focus a lot heavier on Freshworks. So you won't get to see my pretty face as much.
Fair enough. No, that's interesting. And just to the listeners out there, if you've got a view on that or any of the things Bob said about some of the other solutions out there, chime in. Let us know what your thoughts are. Yep. We're coming up to time, so I'd really like to close this session out, Bob, if that's okay with you. We've got some pre-prepared rapid-fire questions.
Sure.
And I know we've shared these with you ahead of time, so hopefully you'll have some rapid-fire answers for us. But I'm going to kick off with the first one. So as a customer, I've had a conversation with you and the team. I'm starting out on my CMDB journey. What 3 things should I be thinking about?
Yeah, and I think you'll be able to logically follow this conclusion based on what we've said already. You need to have the right surface coverage. If it's missing assets within your environment, that's not a complete CMDB. So the first thing I would care about is making sure it's grabbing all your technologies. If you're using AIX servers, your solution needs to discover AIX servers. So just making sure you have a broad enough discovery. Does that necessitate Device42? Not necessarily. If you have a very simple environment, you can get away with a very simple tool. But make sure it does have that coverage across your environment. Make sure you're getting the depth of information you want. So just finding that Windows machine might be good enough if you just need to know how many Windows machines you have. But if you also need to care about software license management, that same solution needs to discover the installed software. Right. If you care about workflows and making sure that you have coverage for that in your disaster recovery plan, then it needs to have application dependency mapping. Right. So making sure that the breadth matches your environment and the depth matches your needs, I would say, are the 2 most important things. And then you need the reliability of that. So whatever your solution is, the cadence of that discovery needs to be encompassing for your work needs. So I would suggest automated discovery. something that's going to learn organically as you add new devices, make sure they're automatically discovered, and that you can set that frequency to as often as you need it. Is that weekly? Is that daily? Is that hourly? What are your business needs? So those are the three things I would say I would look at when starting a CMDB journey.
Oh, very good. So the next question then is, so I spoke to you 3 years ago, Bob. I now have a much more mature ITSM ITOM capability, but I need some help again. So what 3 things should I be thinking about now to really elevate, right, what I've been working on?
Yeah, what I heard is that you have a very mature ITSM ITOM environment, and that's great because that means you can react quickly if there's an issue. And if you can react quickly, if there's an issue, if you can understand up and downstream impacts, that means I'm going to suggest you get risky. Get risky because that's where the fruit is. So take this as your opportunity to modernize workloads, because now I can do that in a more de-risked fashion because I understand those dependencies. I would hunt down technical debt in shadow IT. Again, because you have this great visibility and you can alert people that I'm going to be taking this down because you're leveraging your ITSM functions. It's a great chance to try and remove those kind of shady bits, I would say, from your IT estate, and then getting a competitive advantage on your competition because you can be more agile. And that's really where that pillar comes into play now. Because you're put into a position where you can be more agile, you have a CMDB, you have ITSM, you have ITOM. Let's start cranking those dials on efficiency, on optimization, whether that's cost or performance. You're really in a good position to make change, though, because you have that mature ITSM ITOM.
So be brave.
Be brave. Don't be Nokia.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good.
Okay, and third and final question then. So aside from having a direct engagement with you, Bob, what else would make a very happy Device42 customer?
This is going to sound ironic, but pain. Lots of pain. No, if you think about what this really helps with, it's making sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, right? When log4j comes up, that's the example I gave earlier. There was an issue with, I think, Apache struts or something like that. We had the issue with FortiGuard just recently. Being able to quickly react to that is a big deal. If you have an entire data center go down because of flooding or something like that, but because you have this really robust CMDB, you can react quickly. And instead of being down for weeks, you're down for days. That's where you really become happy that you're a Device42 customer, because that's really where this information is useful, is when you get hit with pain or you get hit with complications or you get hit with anxiety, and we help relieve that. Otherwise, it looks like something you pay money for that you don't use, right? It's like insurance. I don't love insurance until I need insurance. Then I'm like, oh, thank God I had insurance. So that's what makes a happy Device42 customer is pain and complication, because we help a lot. The harder the pain, the more we help.
Sure. You give them the
Prozac for IT. That's something like that.
That's the new strap line. Okay, you heard it here, folks. The new marketing is Prozac for IT.
Yep.
We're going to copyright that one, though. Okay.
It's okay, Bob. If you want to just disclaim that statement, nothing to do with Device42 or Freshservice.
Device42 is not a drug dealer.
Yeah, exactly. And neither are Xcession. Just it's a little joke, you know.
Just to be very,
These messages have not been approved by the FDA.
Yeah.
Well, folks, thank you very much for listening to this point. And Bob, really great to chat with you. Some perfect insights there from our point of view. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it.
No, our pleasure. And for the listeners out there, if you've got any thoughts or feedback on this session, or there's other things you'd like to hear Sunil and I talk about, or indeed guests to come onto the show, leave a comment, let us know, reach out. All right. Thanks for listening. And until next time.
Thank you, Bob.
Have a good one, guys.